be with you and our incoming families as they prepare for their arrival here in Williamsburg in just a few days. As Heather has mentioned, we are in the middle of orientation area director training. These are the student leaders that have been working behind the scenes to ensure that new student orientation and the new student transition is a successful one. And so you may see students running behind me as they are in the midst of prepping training bags for their staff members. So they may get excited and start moving forward. So today, want to talk a little bit about your campus arrival and preparing for your campus arrival. Want to chat about the move-in process and specifically the steps that you can expect to take once you do arrive physically in Williamsburg, or if you're remote, what you can look forward to in terms of that move-in process. Welcome days. So what exactly are the events that are happening over the course of the move-in days, orientation, and then of course what lies ahead for your student once they are here with us. As Heather has mentioned, as you have questions, feel free to put those into the Q&A section and we will answer as many as we can moving forward. So I'm going to keep things brief. So before you even start to pack the car or pack the suitcases to fly to Williamsburg, or rather to Richmond or Norfolk and then drive into Williamsburg, there are three things that you should be planning on doing in preparation. The first is that we're really going to want you to start thinking about the conversations you need to have with your student about expectations, expectations for communication, for behavior, for conduct while they are here in Williamsburg. We want you to talk with them about resources, not just the campus resources, but how that relationship between they as student and child and you as parent and resource may shift a little bit during this course of transition. Talk to them about wellness, not just what are the symptoms of COVID, elephant in the room that we're just going to sort of address right on, but also in terms of mental well-being and being a resilient individual as they step into this next phase of adulting. Talk with them about finances. If they don't know how to write a check, maybe this is a good time to teach them how to do that. If they've never used a debit card or if they're not sure about how to transfer funds, again, great conversations to have. And then we always sort of tongue-in-cheek talk about making sure that your students know how to do laundry and that they're prepared to take care of some of the hygienic pieces of what it means to be an adult and to be an independent individual. And then lastly, want you to chat a little bit about that see you later moment. So what is that going to look like for your family? What are big high topics that you want to make sure that you hit before you even have those tears of goodbye and of see you later? If you've had the opportunity to be on any of our receptions or at any of our receptions this summer, you know that we talked about this see you later a little bit. And for every family, it's going to look a little bit different. But on that day, it doesn't matter how many times you've planned for it or you've sort of run the moment through your mind. It never quite sort of ends where you think it's going to. And so I think being okay with the fact that not everything is going to go 100% perfect is something that we all have to just sort of agree that it's okay for it not to necessarily look quite so picture perfect as we imagine it to be. Let's face it, nothing in 2020 has quite felt that way. And so that see you later just needs to be individualized for your family and for your student. The second thing to do in preparation is the actual packing, not so much the packing of the suitcase, but thinking about what do you need to bring with you to Williamsburg? What does your student need to bring with them to Williamsburg? First of all, think practically. They do not need 72 pairs of underwear. They do not need, probably in this case, the parka that is ready to go for negative 20-degree weather. They will need things like umbrellas, rain boots, things about like a windbreaker, think layers. I always like to tell families to think about sending your child off to camp for an extended stay. So you think about what can be reused multiple times in multiple ways so that you've got some practical pieces available at your fingertips. The other thing is that we'd encourage you to pack in reusable containers such as a plastic tub or tote, and to label those tubs or totes. This will come in extremely handy when it comes time for move in and move out. Those containers can be used obviously in the schlepping process, in and out of residence hall rooms, but obviously can also be used for storage as a laundry tote to and from the washer and dryer, as well as just sort of general storage or hiding spots under the bed, if you will. The last thing you're going to want to do in preparation is to take time to print and or download all of the various QR codes, event passes, and maps that we will be sending to you over the course of the next 4 to 5 days. A lot of those informational pieces will actually be going to your student, and so you'll just want to make sure that you're, again, having a conversation about expectation of sharing resources and sharing information with you, because it is a two-way street. And a lot of times we know that the parents, the families, are actually the ones driving the vehicle into campus, and the student is typically in the back seat or in the passenger seat, helping to guide that process. And so again, making sure that you're talking and communicating about what that looks like. So once you've prepared, obviously we can cross all the items off of our to-do list, but the time will actually come for move-in. At this point in time, all residential new students should have an established move-in appointment time with Residence Life. That move-in time is slated to be the time that you actually enter campus via Compton Drive to check in. It's not necessarily the time frame that we expect you to be at the residence hall in the unloading zone, working through sort of the moving process itself. So as you enter campus via Compton Drive, if you're coming from points east or west, we have on the move-in page of the website given you some very specific instructions about how to traverse Williamsburg and traffic on that day. And so we ask that you follow those directions versus going your own ways or Google Maps. Once you're in the check-in line, you're going to join A or B. Basically, check-in line A is for any residence hall that falls along Richmond Road. Check-in line B is any residence hall that falls along Jamestown Road. And so you'll know your check-in line based off of the color-coded route for the building that your student has been assigned to. The check-in line itself, as you're in your car, you will not actually leave your vehicle at this point in time. But the first step will be making sure that your student has a test result for their recent COVID test. So we'll be checking for a negative test result first. Then your student is going to be asked to scan their QR code in order to receive their room key. You'll then proceed to the next tent to receive your student's wellness kit, which will include 2 reusable masks, several pairs of gloves, some sanitizing wipes, as well as some information about staying healthy here on campus. And then the last step will actually be them having their event pass scanned in order to check in for orientation and to receive their dining meal band for the course of welcome and orientation days. At that point in time, you are free to follow your color-coded route. And that color-coded route is going to directly take you to the unloading zone for your student's residence hall assignment. You have a total of about 2 hours under which to move into your student's space. So about an hour to be in the unloading zone. Once everything is unloaded from your vehicle and placed on the curb, we'll ask that someone in your party move the vehicle while the others start moving items from curbside up to the room. Obviously, once everybody is back in the space together, that's your time to unpack. That's your time to start pulling out mementos, perhaps hanging things on the wall. But that's really going to be your time to get your students settled in. And to maybe even have some of those affirming conversations of, do you know where the laundry room is? Have you checked to make sure that it takes that you know where your resident assistance room is. Do you know where the stairs are? Can you orient yourself in your building? Sort of those general lay of the land comfort issues that we want to make sure that students are good to go with. And then lastly is going to be the see you later. And of course, for every family, this may look different. This may happen in your student's residence hall room. It may happen next to the vehicle. It may happen perhaps as you've gone off campus and enjoyed lunch together or dinner. And so for you, just being mindful of the fact that it's going to look different for each and every person as they come on campus. Following move-in, because we know that students will be staggered and will be joining us on campus at various points in time, we are developing and have developed a series of welcome events so that students can begin engaging in campus activities in a physically distanced and COVID appropriate way. So all of these welcome events are participate by choice. Most of them have registration affiliated so that we can keep the counts low. So again, we offer personalized opportunities, but in smaller groups so that physical distancing is not a sort of a larger concern at that point in time. The welcome events schedule will also include a listing of meal times. All meals for all new students during the course of these welcome days, as well as during new student orientation, will be accessible through a green wristband, just like the one that I'm wearing right now. Again, those green wristbands will be distributed during orientation check-in, so that last station during the move-in process. And then at the end of each day, you'll notice that there's a daily community meeting. And so at the end of each day, all students who have moved into their residential communities will gather with their orientation aides and their resident assistant to engage in appropriate icebreakers, get to know yous, and then learn sort of basic policy and safety protocols for the building so they're set up for success and feel safe navigating their space. During this community meeting is also when their tribe ID cards will be distributed, and the orientation aides will take care of that vetting process to make sure that students have the correct tribe ID, student ID associated with their account given to them. Now, welcome events are going to run that Wednesday, August 12th through Friday, August 14th, right up through dinner, essentially through dinner, because after dinner is when we're going to kick off new student orientation. Orientation for us will be a blended model. It is very much hall community centered for those that are staying on campus. Our commuter students will actually be joining a hall community as well so that they too feel like they have a sense of place and purpose on campus. And then our remote learners who actually right now have been invited to a meetup will be gathered together with remote orientation aides as well so that they can go through and learn a little bit more about our community, our expectations, and so that they will have an idea too of what opportunities and resources are available to them over the course of the fall semester. Now, new student orientation has a mixture of required and elective activities. So there are some presentations that we will absolutely require students to attend, oftentimes because they relate to compliance or conduct matters, and we want to make sure that all students are educated in terms of policies and procedures here on campus. And then, of course, we'll have the traditional fun elective activities such as virtual student organization fairs. There are actually 7 of them embedded across our 5-day orientation because there are that many clubs and orgs who are anxious for your students to arrive on campus and to be part of our community. During the course of orientation, your students will also take part in pre-major academic advisor appointments. So whether your student is a first time in college new student, or they are a transfer or a joint degree programming host student, each of them will have an opportunity to meet with their faculty members. They will receive their class registration PIN, and then they will complete their fall course registration on Monday evening. Now, whether a student is in person, commuting, or they're a remote learner for the fall semester, all students will meet with their faculty members either in person or virtually as appropriate and complete this registration process with the support of not only their orientation aide, but also the Office of Academic Advising. Orientation activities truly wrap up the evening of the Tuesday before the start of classes. So what really is going to happen beyond that Tuesday is really what's going to set them up for success for their William and Mary experience. So this year, for some of those who may have joined us for the town hall last night, you may have heard that Convocation is going to be a two-part event this year. So for the fall, we're going to do a virtual academic year kickoff. Each of our orientation groups and communities will actually gather and form watch parties for this event on Wednesday evening. It will be live streamed, so you too can have your own watch party from the comfort of your living room. And we will be partaking in special sort of William and Mary centered treats here on campus over the course of the evening, thanks to dining services. After that first day of classes, your students will start hearing about things offered out of the Office of First Year Experience, a series of programs that are finding, forming, and focusing your experience. So your very first weekend at William and Mary will be, as it's written here, my first William and Mary weekend. And that's really an opportunity for students to start exploring and figuring out where they might want to fit into our family. Where do they want to fit into our community, academically or co-curricularly? And this is when a lot of our clubs and orgs will begin to host those virtual engagement opportunities and kick off interest meetings. Over the course of the fall semester, your students will be required to complete essential first year initiatives. This is a series of topics that build on the presentations addressed during orientation and encourage students to think about how they can participate as an active, engaged citizen within the William and Mary community around topics such as health and wellness, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and of course, academic success and enrichment. Our office will also partner during the Find Your Experience program with the Office of Academic Advising and the Cohen Career Center to encourage students to start thinking not just about what's happening now, but what could be in terms of their future, their passions, and their pursuits of interest, and how these really reflect what they're getting involved in outside of the academic classroom. We talk a lot about meaningful involvement, and one of the phrases that you all will hear as families from our Office of Student Leadership Development is the phrase depth over breadth. We really want students to dig deep and think about how they want to change the world. And William and Mary as a campus community is an excellent starting place for them to start exploring how they can make change happen. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is that during this first year, as they find their experience and they figure out who they are as an individual, we're going to be encouraging a lot of personal reflection as they start to wrangle with our university values in comparison with family and personal values and what they're learning in the academic setting. How does all of that fit? What does that mean for them as individuals, and where do they go from here? Not just necessarily into their second year, third year, and beyond, but as a global member of this William and Mary community. It's important to note, though, that FYE, while we do have a lot of, obviously, first year experience centered activities, are focusing and forming activities that will happen sort of in a stepped phase between years 2 and 3, and then ultimately their final year towards graduation, that our office is really about the transition and how do we support students as they move into sort of one phase of being and belonging into the next. And so we're excited to be on this journey with you, not just over the course of these next 2 to 3 months, but obviously throughout the course of your entire university journey. And of course, our partner in that is Parent and Family Programs. So at this point in time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to let Heather sort of help pick us up so that I can answer the many questions that are coming through our Q&A function at this time.
Wonderful.
Heather, is there anything else I need to know?
Not at the current moment. Thank you for that presentation. I know that answers a few of the questions that people have been wondering in terms of logistics. You know, we're thinking about move-in day, but sometimes we don't really think about the steps to actually getting to move-in day. So I know I'm seeing a lot of questions, so please do continue submitting those via the Q&A feature here in Zoom. We'll ask as many as we have time for. I do want to acknowledge that a lot of questions that you all have been asking were answered last night during the town hall, which was recorded. You can view that on the Path Forward website, and I would recommend doing so. Another question that I'm seeing a lot and I want to address up top is you're wondering, it's been longer than 48 hours and you haven't received your test result from Calico. I want you to know that I hear you and I acknowledge you, and I understand that this is causing you some concern, and we have a team who's working behind the scenes as I speak right now, who is working to get answers to those questions. So I will not be able to provide you a specific answer this afternoon, but know that we are working diligently to get answers to your questions, and we will communicate with you as soon as we have answers. So thank you for your patience on that. I want to start though, if our check-in time is at 3, do we line up on Compton then? Or can we do that earlier and head towards our dorm at 3? Or do I need to be in line at like 1:30? When do I get in line?
It's the age-old question. Do you try to be first and beat the rush, or do you try to hang back and see if you can sort of hit a slow peak? I think that the time frames are sort of the time that you want to shoot to be actually on Compton Drive. And so if you are, for instance, slated for a move-in time slot of 3 o'clock, about 2:45, I would start making your way to campus. Now, if you're in line and you hit the key station and it's a little bit before 3, no one's going to turn you away. And I think that that's important for us to all sort of hear, is that we recognize that there may be issues with traffic, especially those who might be joining us from the DC metropolitan area. And so we know that there are going to be some potential hiccups, and you just need to communicate with us. And so if you notice that your time slot is slowly sort of passing you by because you're stuck on 95, send just a quick message to living@wm.edu and let them know you're running late. Chances are, as long as you get to us before the last 5:30 time slot on your student's day, we'll be able to move you in, no problem.
Thank you. My husband has never been to campus. Can we walk around the grounds during the move-in dates?
Yes, the public is welcome to walk through campus. We do ask that you follow safety protocol, which for us right now means physical distancing, as well as the wearing of masks or face coverings across campus. You will notice though that we are not technically open as a campus to the public, and so academic buildings will not be open for you to walk through, but the physical space itself and the campus grounds will be available for you to enjoy.
Thank you.
I feel like I should thank you, Heather, for coordinating this.
Oh, anytime. When will we be getting the email with the hang tag and the QR code and those important things that you mentioned we should have ready?
Awesome. So I would anticipate that email coming from Residence Life probably on Monday. Part of what's happening right now that Heather alluded to, there is some what I call triangulation of test results and things of that nature, so that we'll be sending QR hang tags to students for whom we have test results back from, who were able to move on campus, so that can serve as another sort of talking point. If you don't have that, then that maybe means that you need to think about your move-in process and the timing of that move-in, that timeline, depending on your test result.
Is there a schedule available for orientation activities?
So the schedule for orientation will actually be up this weekend. Part of why it is not published earlier is because every building goes through orientation differently. Right now there's a lot of flexing and a lot of moving, with some of your students making the choice to be a remote learner and some of your students making some roommate choices. And so we try to limit the publishing of that because we don't want the fear of missing out to hinder their willingness to advocate for themselves. But yes, the actual formal outline of the program will be released this weekend.
And along similar lines, the draft of the family orientation schedule is available online. I say draft lightly. There will be a prettier version coming out, but basically that schedule is what it is. But I do want to make it prettier than just a Word document for all of the families. So you can review that schedule if you're interested in learning more about parent and family orientation.
The other piece that I will encourage you to do is to download the mobile app if you have not yet done so already. There is a new student and family persona within the William & Mary mobile app that includes a web responsive version of not just family orientation, but also new student orientation. And once those events are live this weekend, you and your student will actually be able to filter out their particular schedule and just follow their schedule, much like you would a conference app. Or a larger event app.
Okay, after our move-in is complete, is it expected that our student stays on campus and we say, see you later there? Or can they come eat dinner with us or even sleep in our hotel if that is something they want to do?
Again, I think that see you later is going to look different for each and every family. If you need a little bit more time together, obviously you need to do and make decisions that are best for you. But this also goes back to that conversation that was held in the town hall. I believe it was Wednesday night, about sort of knowing what your comfort levels are around sort of our current pandemic situation. And so if you just being mindful of the fact that your student will be navigating this roommate situation for the first time and being aware of how much interaction you might be having with others publicly. Just making sure that you're sort of being mindful of the larger community as you're making those decisions. I do know that there are families that are planning on doing dinner or lunch after move-in. That's fine. I think that there are some families that are even planning on using the sort of welcome days as their own time to explore Williamsburg. And to that, I say, again, you make choices that are good for you and your family. And it's a good conversation for your student to have with their roommate about those plans, especially because if your student moves in and then you abscond with them for 2 or 3 days, the roommate may sort of feel like they've done something wrong, or that something has happened that they weren't in sort of the know about. So again, encouraging the roommate conversations about plans during those welcome days may also be helpful. I do know that there are an awful lot of students and families where the plan is just to say, see you later, and families will leave campus and students will remain. And that's perfectly fine. And in fact, that was sort of the original expectation with everything that we knew as sort of initial plans were being made. And so thus the welcome day activities were planned to keep students busy and engaged, but also engaging at a level that feels comfortable to them. That's a great question. I'm loving these questions.
They're really great questions, and please do continue submitting them. I know that our Family Friday today is about orientation and move-in, but we will cover a variety of topics. So if you have questions outside of that realm, please do submit those. So this one is a little bit outside of the orientation realm. You know, what a nice segue. Will students be able to go in other students' rooms if they live within the same residence hall?
Oh, that's excellent. That's an excellent question. I think this is where it's going to come down to students having conversations with one another. So the Residence Life has there has been guidance put out about visitors and guests within residence hall communities, sort of outside community members, not going into other residence halls. I think that when we're thinking about buildings, every building looks a little bit different. So for those that have not yet visited campus, or for those that are super familiar with campus, you know that there are no two buildings that look exactly alike unless you're in the Botetourt complex or Green and Gold Village. And then everything else is sort of up for grabs. So when you're thinking about the layout of a building itself, we have the building and then we have the floor communities. So much of orientation is being done based off of floor communities. because we want, in some cases, for students to create a little bit of a community bubble. And that doesn't mean that that bubble is where they don't have to wear a mask and they don't have to physically distance, but that bubble at least is sort of a group of students that you know and you trust, and you sort of have a baseline of how you're going to interact with everyone. As soon as you start to introduce students from other floors into your bubble, a conversation needs to happen about what's appropriate, and what you're comfortable with. And so within the first few days of orientation, your students will actually engage in the creation of community agreements, and they'll have conversations with their resident assistants. Resident assistants are upper level students who've been trained by the Office of Residence Life and Facilitation and Community Development, and they are specifically placed in these communities to help students begin to have conversations about boundaries and about expectations. And so for some folks, they may be perfectly okay with someone from another hall or floor coming onto their sort of into their community bubble, or even into their personal space, and others may not. But those are going to be conversations that the community will make together on some level, within appropriate sort of COVID guidelines. So of course they won't supersede anything that the university is stating, but they're going to sort of, if there's an additional level of concern, then they will be able to address that within their own group individually.
One question that I see here, family member asking, where can I find my student's QR check-in code?
So your student's QR check-in code will actually be emailed to them from Residence Life starting on Monday, is my understanding. And that QR check-in code will also be found on the housing portal once they're released. And so it will come to your student via their William and Mary email, and they can either print it or they can screenshot it. But as long as they sort of have it and can display that QR code as your car is up sort of to that stage of the move-in process, you should be all set to check in and to have your student receive their key.
One question I'm seeing here, how long will we have to move my student in?
So we're asking that students sort of be settled into their residence hall spaces within about a 2-hour span. And we know that the settling in process takes longer than 2 hours, but really settling in with family and guests with them. So your move-in time frame, it was slated for an hour. That hour sort of dictates how long we expect to have the unloading zone occupied. And then the additional hour within that time block is an expectation of you really spending time together as a family unit, whether that's unpacking, whether it's, walking across campus, or it's just sort of simply chatting as your student begins to fill the dresser drawer with belongings. But that 2-hour time block is what we're going to be asking folks to abide by. And it's going to be an honor system and on some level, but it's one that we need to be mindful of as a community, because we are doing the staggering process. The staggered move-in is to help densify campus appropriately. And if we have too many outside guests or visitors, then it's really, for too long, a prolonged period of time, we're really sort of nullifying the efforts that we've made with the staggered process.
Okay, are remote students able to participate in orientation activities?
Yes, and they're still required to participate in orientation. So remote students will be emailed by a remote orientation aide. They will be part of a group themselves, and they will go through orientation together virtually. The beauty of us sort of creating a blended program means that everything that's being done in person can also be done virtually. So a lot of Zoom links are in their future. A lot of Access Google Meetups are going to be in their future. But everything that's being offered in person will also have a Zoom or a YouTube link so that students can participate alongside their classmates in whatever activity that might be, from the opening welcome event to the 1 of 7 student organization and activities fairs.
Wonderful. So how will commuters receive their wellness kit and check in for orientation?
Great question. So specific information about check-in for commuters, transfers, and joint degree program host students will be coming to them via their William and Mary emails from their orientation aides. Students who are not residing on campus but are participating in in-person orientation or this blended orientation will actually check in on Saturday morning. And they'll come to the Sadler Center in order to accomplish that, where we can practice physical distancing. At that point in time, they'll meet with their other orientation group members and then go along their merry way. This program is built, again, to be flexible. So if students have something that they're balancing, such as a work schedule or family or spouse commitments, then obviously we'll be flexible as best we can to make sure that they meet not only the requirements, but also have an opportunity sort of to take care of whatever they need to in their daily lives.
Will we be directed where to park after we unload our vehicle?
Yes, so each move-in route has a designated parking location, and that move-in route and that parking location will be denoted in the Google Map move-in route. That's a lot of words in a header, but the Google Map move-in routes that are going to be published this weekend, now that we have affirmation of affirmed move-in dates and times, those will be included in those maps. And for most folks, it will be parking either in the garage that's immediately adjacent to the Miller School of Business, or excuse me, the Mason School of Business in Miller Hall, or over in Kaplan Arena.
Okay, Lauren, you might not know the answer to this question, but I am curious. In the residence halls, how much does a load of laundry cost, and how much does a load cost for the dryer?
I'm laughing because I think the last time that I actually looked at the price of laundry in a residence hall was probably last move-in time this past year, and I believe the number I saw was $150 for wash and $150 for dry. Don't quote me on that, but I'm sure that there is I'm sure that information is actually on the Residence Life website. Regardless, I think the thing to sort of take note of is the fact that when your student receives their tribe card, when they actually receive their student ID, which will look something like this, on that first day of welcome, this tribe card is essentially their access point, not only to get into the residence halls, but it also is where you can put money on their card through Tribe Card Services. And this card is what they can swipe in order to gain access to the washer and the dryer. So gone are the days of having to tote around a little bag filled with quarters. This is sort of what they need. You need to add Express, I believe is what it's called now, to the ID card so that they can do their laundry. And then, of course, the age-old rule that just because everything fits into one washer and one dryer cycle doesn't mean that it ought to, is also a good rule of thumb when it comes to the washing and drying process.
Great conversations to have before arrival on campus. Now, on that note, how are the students going to receive their tribe card? How will remote students, commuters, and our residential students receive those?
So residential students will receive their tribe cards at their community meetings that first day that they've moved on campus. Commuter students will receive it when they check in for orientation on that Saturday morning, and remote learners will be able to pick up their tribe card via appointment when they actually arrive on campus. So if that's in the spring semester, that's great. If they come to visit campus in the fall, they can make an appointment with Tribe Card Services and make arrangements to pick up their ID then.
Wonderful. I have a question here. Are there any in-person family events? I will say no with a tiny little asterisk that during the move-in days, we will have 5 welcome tents located across campus. And so those will be staffed by the Parent and Family Program staff and some other volunteers who will be helping us. Just so you can stop by, grab a bottle of water. You can ask us for directions or any questions that you have, and we'll try to be a welcoming presence for you. But all other family events will be remote for this orientation. That's a great question. What time does orientation events start on the evening of the 14th?
So the first orientation event will kickstart after dinner around 7:00 p.m. We want students to wrap up with welcome days. We also recognize that the last move-in shift is at about 4:30, 5 o'clock. And so we want to honor the fact that families may still be on campus with their students, and we don't want to quite pull them away too quickly from those see you later moments. So 7 p.m. is the time frame that you can expect to sort of have your first orientation kickoff.
Wonderful. I saw a question through here at one point about the weather. How should we prepare for all scenarios given that it's Williamsburg? It has rained a lot lately, and so how do we prepare for rain on move-in day? How do we prepare for the heat on move-in day? What are some of those tips for our families?
Layers. Lots and lots of layers is sort of the rule of thumb. Move-in day is not for the faint of heart. It's also not the time for high heels and business attire. Feel free to don your tribe pride, to wear your green and gold, to wear that family t-shirt. But we want you to dress comfortably and practically for the day. For those of you that will be traversing stairs, make sure that you're wearing closed-toed shoes, sneakers, things that have good solid tread so that you're able to move up and down those stairs safely, especially if the weather is a little bit rainy and there's the potential for slick tile or linoleum on the floors. I would say that for move-in in general, whether we have a little bit of rain or a little bit of heat, you're going to want to dress, again, comfortably. You're going to want to dress in things that are breathable, things that will dry quickly, in the sense of, I would not recommend wool unless it's going to be on your feet, in the form of wool socks inside of your boots or your shoes. I would recommend bringing a light jacket or parka in case there is rain, especially with a hood. It just makes it a little bit easier to traverse campus and to move things in versus carrying an umbrella. And then, of course, if there's heat, being mindful of bringing with you perhaps a few bottles of water, maybe some small snacks, so that you can sort of keep blood sugar at an even keel. However, to make a plug for the welcome tents, I do know that Heather and her team are planning on having some water available at their welcome tents as a courtesy. But I always am the be prepared category, where a small cooler or a small sort of bag filled with snacks and beverages for your family to keep up hydration is always encouraged, whether it's rain or shine.
Wonderful. I have a question here. Will there be a tour of campus during orientation for students?
Orientation tends to include a lot of walking and traversing across campus, and so tours are sort of built into the process in a very inherent, holistic way. Over the course of the Welcome Day program, we will be offering what we like to call campus tours with a little bit of more. So campus tours that have a topical interest around a theme, such as cool study spots or sustainability or even historical places and faces, will be offered to give students a little bit of that sort of inside scoop to campus, but campus tours will be built into the orientation program so students know where to go once in-person classes resume.
Wonderful. I'm seeing lots of questions about how many people can help us move in, how many helpers are allowed on move-in day, and what if I bring more than the allotted amount of helpers?
So I think it is quite natural that everyone wants to see students off to sort of this next college adventure. We're going to ask that students bring with them 2 helpers into the residence halls. And that obviously helps us keep density at an appropriate level, but it also sort of reduces the risk of contamination. If others are going to be choosing to see your student off, I think it's about being mindful of where are they located and where are those interactions happening. And we would prefer that those interactions happen outside of the residence halls. So if more than 2 people are joining you in the campus journey, then maybe making sure that those folks stay close to the car or in the car during the process versus going into the residence halls. But 2 is the official rule. 2 is the official rule.
Thank you for that clarification. So, do we allow local food deliveries such as restaurants, cookies, care packages at the residence halls?
We do. In a lot of cases, vendors and businesses that know us and know our campus will be more than happy to deliver to residence hall locations, especially with food delivery becoming ever more prevalent during these recent months. And so students are able to order things for themselves and for families to order care packages and the like to arrive on their doorstep. There are a number of different merchants and vendors that the Office of First Year Experience has worked with in the past, and we hope to be providing you with some additional information about some of those vendors and services specific to this new student transition over the course of the next few weeks. And that information will be delivered alongside some of the resources that are made available to you from parent and family programs over the course of family orientation. In addition to that, though, anything that you might ship to your student that requires delivery from UPS or FedEx, whether it's a surprise shower caddy, or it's that extra 2x3 rug that they so desperately wanted for their room, that whatever that might look like, you will want to make sure that you are having that sent to the post office here on campus versus their residence hall physical address. UPS and FedEx will not deliver to our residence halls, but they will deliver to our post office here on campus. And to know your student's College Station Unit or CSU box number, you should be able to find that 4 to 5 numeric code within your student's housing portal. It should be listed alongside their residence hall assignment.
Those are great tips. So when will dining halls open for students? Should we prepare to feed them while they are waiting for orientation to begin?
Absolutely not. I am a big believer in food as a way to build community, and dining halls will be open starting with that first day of move-in. The Welcome Day program includes meals over the course of those 3 days and obviously into orientation. Again, that green wristband is what's going to give them access to the dining halls over the course of Welcome Days and orientation. The dining hall will open for new students starting with what we call brunch, from about 10:30 to 2:30 on Wednesday, followed by dinner in the evening, and then breakfast, lunch, dinner following throughout the rest of the semester.
Wonderful. Is it safe to assume that a negative result of the test was sent to William and Mary and that we do not have to send it to you?
That is correct. It is safe to assume that if you have completed the testing process and your student opens up the portal and sees a negative result there on the screen, that information has also been made known to William and Mary. The one piece to sort of remind your student is that there is no automatic push notification that a result has been received. And so students do need to take it on their own responsibility or recognizance to take a look and open up that portal a day or two after sending in their sample so that they can see if they have a result. I know that is something that we have been seeing with some upper level students, assuming that they'd get a push notification, and in fact there is not.
One question I have about registering for classes.
Mm-hmm.
Should I be spending time between now and before I meet with my advisor or create that final schedule to be thinking about what classes I want to have? Can I expect that more classes will be added to the catalog? How should I be preparing for creating that final schedule?
I think at this point in time, your student needs to take a deep breath and rely on the wisdom of their pre-major faculty advisor. So when they go in for that conversation is going to start with, why did you pick the classes that you picked during the course of the summer registration period? And then what are you looking forward to taking potentially this fall? A lot of those questions should have already been answered through the process of the College Studies Blackboard course, because they were asked to submit a sample schedule through the course of one of those assignments. And so even if that was just sort of a rough cut of, I think I might want to, that's a great starting point for that pre-major faculty advisor appointment. We do not expect students to be spending hours poring over the open course catalog, trying to figure out exactly what they want to do for the fall semester. And we'd encourage them to sort of lean in to their student leaders when they arrive on campus and have conversations with them about how did they pick their classes for that first fall semester? What did they find helpful? What was challenging for them? And then, of course, talking with their faculty advisors over the course of either Sunday or Monday, depending on their appointment time block. The faculty advisors will have a lot of learned wisdom to share, some of which that every year we learn something new in terms of a tip or a trick. And so we really want students to stay open and receptive to some of those thoughts and feedback.
I have a question here. Can you tell us when students will be able to participate in recruitment? And so I have some information that is hot off the presses. Our 2020 Panhellenic recruitment will be taking place beginning September 4th, with bid day on Sunday, September 13th, and that will be a fully virtual experience. I'm going to post in the chat more information about fraternity and sorority life so that you all can explore the variety of options for students when it comes to that. Lauren, will they be learning more about fraternity and sorority life during orientation?
Yes, one of the student organization and activity fairs that is slated during orientation is specifically around fraternity and sorority life and all 3 councils that the university offers.
And I will also say that during family orientation, we will also have a session dedicated to fraternity and sorority life. So that is a wonderful question. Okay, so on the day that I move my student in, if we take them out to dinner for their see you later, are we allowed to come back with them to the residence hall to help them settle in?
At that point in time, we would ask that you not re-enter the residence hall to help them settle in. It's a good, I can understand the want to sort of have an additional touch point. But again, thinking about how we're re-densifying campus, would ask that you sort of limit your time in the residence hall to be those 2 hours during which you originally moved them in.
Lauren, we talked about loading money onto the Tribe Card earlier. Is there a way to do that remotely, or do we need to get that done while we're on campus moving them in?
Absolutely not. You can actually load your student's Tribe Card online through the Tribe Card Services website. There is a link that you can follow that allows you to remotely put funds onto their card. And then you can actually, the student can actually sort of track how they've been spending those funds as well during that ledger.
I have a question here about bikes. If my student brings a bike to campus, does it need to be registered right away?
How are we defining right away? I think it is safe to say if your student's bringing a bike to campus, one of the first things that they probably should have on their to-do list is to get it registered on campus, just to make sure that it's one thing that's done and accomplished. As to whether or not it needs to be done within the first 30 minutes of their campus arrival, Probably not. Within the first day or so, yes, definitely have it on their to-do list, and it can be something that they complete over the course of that welcome day period. That welcome day period is also a good time for them to take a look at the schedule and see when they can pick up their key for their CSU post box over in the Sadler Center. It's also a good time for them to take a tour of the bookstore and to get a lay of the land. So really think of these welcome days as not just moving in and getting them settled, but thinking about an opportunity for your student really to start putting together some of those pieces of adulting together, where they're taking responsibility for getting that move-in key, for making sure that they sign off and receive their ID at their community meeting, and that they're taking responsibility for getting their bicycles registered.
Can we come visit our student during the semester, take them to dinner, and just, get eyes on them during the course of the semester?
Of course, we're never going to tell you that you can't see your student. What we are going to probably do is ask that you, again, limit your time on campus. And if you choose to come on campus, that you follow whatever protocols are in place, face coverings, physical distancing, things of that nature, depending on your comfort level. We will ask that your student, again, have conversations with their roommates and with their community mates about sort of expectations upon re-entering the community. I know that some homes have been working through COVID and safety protocols differently than others. And so thinking about how we're being mindful around sanitation and cleanliness and hygiene is just, again, another one of those conversations that we're going to be encouraging students to have with each other.
When and how will my student learn who his pre-major advisor is?
The pre-major advisor. The pre-major advisor information will be distributed to students during orientation. They'll go through an academic life session on the Saturday morning, during Saturday of orientation. I hesitate to say morning because time zones for our remote learners might look a little bit different, but over the course of Saturday of orientation, and then following that session, they'll receive instructions from their orientation aides about how to access their advisor information and then set up their appointment to follow either on that Sunday or Monday, depending on schedule availability.
Okay, I'm going to circle back to a couple questions that we covered at the very beginning,
Okay.
just so we can cover some folks who may have joined us a little bit later. One of those questions is, what will be happening during those move-in and welcome days if they're not at orientation?
If they're not at orientation, they should be at orientation.
Well, I'm talking prior to the 14th.
Oh, okay, perfect. I was like, wait. So during welcome days, we'll be doing everything from core logistics, such as encouraging students to pick up their mailbox keys over in the Sadler Center, to registering bicycles, as we've already had one terrific question about, to sort of getting the lay of the land of the bookstore and becoming familiar with campus, just sort of campus layout. Other activities that will be slated include campus tours, health and wellness activities, both virtually and in person in the Wellness Center here on campus, as well as opportunities to get out and explore College Woods and Lake Matoka through our Tribe Adventure program through Campus Recreation. So there's a little bit of something for everyone. Some offices will be hosting open office hours. A few different academic programs will also be hosting virtual open houses, so that students who are interested in perhaps an academic pursuit or interest area have an opportunity to speak with faculty or students who participate in those programs before they start classes as well. So think of welcome days as a chance to start, again, that adulting process mixed with a little bit of engagement opportunity.
Thank you. So if my move-in appointment is at 1 o'clock, when should I start heading toward Compton Drive and the check-in station?
A good rule of thumb for me is going to be about 10-15 minutes before, because the goal is that at that appointment time you were in line in Compton. Obviously, we know that it will be a convergence of cars and vehicles, and so there will be a little bit of a waiting game before and after, depending on flow. But we are separating the lines to keep everything moving, and there will be lots of opportunities for you to engage with student volunteers and staff as we welcome you to campus during this process.
Okay. So if my student is still considering remote learning, is there someone on campus they can reach out to consult with about switching to remote courses?
Absolutely. So students that are thinking about engaging in remote learning for the fall semester should reach out to the Office of Academic Advising and specifically speak with Shelley Lorenzo, our Associate Director. Shelley is an excellent resource and has worked with many of our students who are in a similar situation, trying to think about what courses could fulfill major requirements, whether they're a first-time in college freshman or a transfer student. Also thinking about what courses might set them up for success when they do return to campus in the spring semester as well, and thinking about sequencing of electives and of course and offerings. Once you've made a decision about whether or not you want to be remote or your student wants to be remote this fall semester, if the desire is to be remote, just simply make sure that they complete the appropriate exemption form on the Office of Residence Life's housing portal page under the housing contract. And then that will automatically indicate to us that they need to be placed in a remote orientation group. But Shelley can definitely set them on the right foot moving forward.
Thank you. So will students be given a map of all of the academic buildings so they can find their way to classes once we reach that point?
So a map of campus is actually embedded in our mobile application. And while there are maps that are available for download and for print, which we are happy to provide to students, we actually encourage them to utilize the mobile app version because it syncs with their phone's navigation system. And so they literally can get step-by-step instructions on how to walk or bike from point A to point B. Physical or printed campus maps, of course, will be provided upon request.
Seeing a question here, Lauren, do you know if there is liquid hand soap in the residence hall bathrooms?
Typically, yes. I'm running through again sort of the list of residence halls, but typically, yes, liquid hand soap is available in all the restrooms. Of course, students are welcome to bring their own liquid hand soap if they have a preference, but no items will be allowed to remain in the bathrooms. And so that's where that shower caddy that you see being sold at all the various different back to school sales right now will definitely come in handy, as students will need to take sort of items with them into the restroom and then take the items with them when they depart.
We talked a little bit earlier about mailings. One family asks, I've seen where there are two different addresses depending on who is delivering it. What if we do not know how it will be delivered? For example, Amazon sometimes ships through USPS and sometimes through UPS. I can attest to that. Sometimes you don't know who's bringing your package. Do we have advice for families around that?
What I can tell you is that at the core, as long as you can put in your student's name, the fact that it's going to P.O. Box 8795, and it's using the zip code, the 231878795. We are a small enough community that most of our FedEx and UPS and USPS deliverers know where they're headed based off of how things are addressed. So much so that they're actually campus specific delivery folks. And so they sort of know the back end delivery system, even if we don't necessarily know it when we're putting in the address. But at the core, making sure that it's going to the P.O. box is going to be key.
I had a follow-up question based on our bathroom conversation. Who will be responsible for cleaning the restrooms and how often will they be cleaned?
So the common restrooms, so where there's more than sort of two rooms sharing a restroom, will be cleaned and maintained by members of our facilities management staff, and they will be cleaned and disinfected twice a day.
Okay. I see a few questions along the same theme. Are there refillable water bottle stations on campus, and will they be open this semester?
Yes. So most academic buildings, most of our larger public buildings have refillable water bottle stations, and they will be open. What will not be open will be water fountains, because obviously there's a difference between a water fountain, which sort of has the arc, versus a refillable water station, which is sort of a direct pour. And so through guidelines, we know that refillable water bottle stations are allowed and are safe for use. Water fountains are not.
Thank you for that clarification. I actually saw that question 5 times, so I'm very thankful that you could answer that for us.
Well, I think that that also goes back to how we're thinking about moving in and packing and thinking a little bit more sustainably about what we're bringing. So encourage your student to bring a water bottle. You know, they all tend to have sort of their favorites. They're the new coffee mugs in some ways. And so encourage them to bring their water bottles. Think about, you know, utensils that they can wash and reuse in their residence hall rooms versus relying on disposable in some cases, because you can also attest to the cleanliness that way a little bit better as well.
Okay. So if my student doesn't receive a test result before their scheduled move-in day, how do we go about rescheduling their move-in?
Okay, so if your student needs to reschedule their move-in and they are within roughly a day's 24 hours out from their actual original move-in appointment, they should be able to go into the Residence Life housing portal and reslate that time block. If you're closer to sort of that 24, 12-hour time period and you're realizing that you need to make a change, you will need to email living@wm.edu, and they will help reschedule you on the back end. Now, if we're talking about a move-in date that's on a Friday and you're realizing that perhaps your test result won't come in by that 4 p.m. timeframe on Friday, you're simply going to need to email FYE, let us know sort of the situation that you're in. We will make arrangements to have your student join in with their residence hall community and participate in orientation remotely with that group. And then we will help you work with Residence Life to set up a meeting time or a move-in time once that test result comes in and is negative.
Thank you. And for families who may have just joined us, I covered this before we started Q&A, and I will reiterate once more. I know that there are many questions out there. Some of you are seeing that it's taking longer than 48 hours to get a test result, and you're wondering what's going on there. I don't have an answer for you at this time, but I do want you to know that we know that you are asking those questions and that this is definitely a concern for you. And we are doing our best to come up with an answer for you, and we will let you know as soon as we have more information, even if that's something that happens over the weekend. So please stay tuned and know that that is something that we are working on for all of you. I am going to scroll here for a moment through questions.
So Heather, I am looking at now, we've had a lot of questions about postal tips and mailing. And so I am going to paste in the chat the Postal Service's guidelines for addresses as well, in hopes
Thank
of
you.
helpful.
Lauren, where on campus can the Tribe card be used besides paying for laundry?
So the Tribe card can actually be used at multiple places around campus. It can be used as to pay for items purchased in the Student Exchange in the Sadler Center. It can be used at the Tribe Market, which is outside of the Commons Dining Hall. It can also be used off campus. There are several vendors in the Williamsburg community that will take what's called William & Mary Express. And William & Mary Express is that debit system that we were talking about earlier. You put money on your student's ID card, and it essentially turns it into a little bit of a debit card system. And so there are several food service vendors. There are several grocery stores that will take William & Mary Express, and William & Mary Express is used through that Tribe card plastic piece. There is a whole list of vendors on and off campus that I will copy and paste into the chat. That website also has links to where and how you can deposit funds for your student on or off campus, as well as how you and your student can check that balance so that you know sort of where things are standing.
Wonderful. So I did see a question here. Can we get a rapid test result done for our student and present that to William and Mary? And so I do want to mention something that was shared today. It is information about COVID testing at William and Mary, which I'm going to paste here for you all to see. But essentially, those who have been tested through other services will need to complete a Calico test, and it is the Calico test result that William and Mary will be using to determine whether your student has tested negative. So a Calico test will be required for that check-in process. Okay, question about rugs. Lauren, can multiple 2x3 rugs be brought into rooms?
As long as all of those 2x3 rugs are then removed from the room at the end of the semester, sure. I think the primary purpose around that 2x3 rug delineation was because when we did our move out this past spring, there were quite a few rugs that were simply left behind. They were too heavy, they were too big. And so a lot of this is just sort of being mindful about what exactly are you using a rug for and where is it going. No one's going to come through and necessarily do a double check there, but it is about sort of being smart about what you're bringing into your space, because what you bring in is what you have to bring out.
I have a question here. I heard them talk last night on the town hall about packing a go bag for our students. What should be in that go bag?
So the go bag, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Heather, you had an excellent little reference to that in yesterday's parent and family newsletter as well.
I did.
The core of that to-go bag is obviously going to be your students' essential items. So any essential medications, personal effects, clothing, things of that nature will need to be in that to-go bag. I think they did put a number as far as days. It was somewhere between perhaps 10 to 12 days worth of clothing. And jokingly, as I hear those sorts of things, I also do a little bit of like, I don't know that I have that many items of clothing that I wear that frequently that I would be able to pack up and still have a wardrobe left on some level. But I think it's thinking about, what's going to be comfy to your student when they're in that situation. And for most of us, we're probably not going to be getting dressed up if we're staying in our space or sort of padding around just to get food or sort of just to do homework. And so those 10 to 12 days worth of clothing could be extra pairs of pajama bottoms, yoga pants, t-shirts, things of that nature. But it's about getting them to be a little bit more proactive in their thinking about what will be comfortable if you're not feeling perhaps 100% yourself. The other thing is to remember that there's laundry available. And so just because you've packed the to-go bag doesn't mean that you necessarily are stuck with those outfits that you've premeditatedly packed 2 to 3 weeks before perhaps you've had to use it. Hopefully you won't have to use it at all.
Another helpful packing tip that I didn't include in the family newsletter, but I'll probably include in some email, or I'll say it right now, is that another family shared on our Facebook group that bringing a lawn chair, one of those foldable, collapsible lawn chairs, is a great idea this semester, as students may be spending more time outside with their friends hanging out. And so I think that's something great to include in your packing list if you have space in the car and you want to bring one of those that just goes over the shoulder and that the student can take with them if they want to eat outside or study outside. I think that's also a helpful packing tip as well. Will we as parents be able to walk freely around campus after we drop our student off on move-in day? And then can we meet up with him later, or are there restrictions?
So right now, when you enter sort of the immediate campus physical grounds, you're greeted by signs that ask you to participate in our safety guidelines, which include wearing a face covering and maintaining physical distance. That indicates to me that folks are welcome to move freely about the institution. However, we are not technically, our buildings are not technically open to the public at this point in time, and so buildings will not be unlocked for you to peruse. But yes, more than welcome to walk yourself around, to go down and visit the Duke of Gloucester Streets, Colonial Williamsburg, and to see what's happening in that neck of the woods as well.
Okay. Will students be given guidance on opening checking accounts during orientation, and is there a preferred bank for students?
Yes, during orientation, we will talk a little bit about financial literacy and encouraging students to think about if they have not yet opened a bank account that has a branch here in Williamsburg, that they will want to be able to do that. We do not necessarily have a preferred bank here on campus. However, there is an ATM on campus that is affiliated with Wells Fargo. However, there is a SunTrust within walking distance. There are also BB&Ts, as well as several other bank branches sort of around the immediate area, as well as ATMs in several of the convenience stores adjacent to campus. And so I don't know that you necessarily need to establish a banking account here in Williamsburg, as long as your current account is linked to a national network.
Okay, can you tell us more about what is an acceptable mask for our student to bring with them?
So my understanding, and I would defer ultimately to the guidance that's being put forth by Sam Jones and our COVID response team, but my understanding is that an acceptable mask is one that covers both nose and mouth. So I have mine here. And so as I muffle myself, any sort of face covering that sort of allows you to maintain healthy breathing, but also limits exposure to others is what's going to be acceptable. Over the ear loops are what we're seeing most frequently for students because the straps tend to fall. And then the elastics also allow for sort of cleaner removal and putting on. We are following those right now across the university, and the masks that are being provided to students in their wellness kits. There are two reusable masks are being included in those wellness kits that they will receive at the time of campus check-in or orientation check-in if your student is a commuter student. But those masks are fabric and they are elastic versus ribbon.
And I did just look and see an email went out on July 14th regarding face covering requirements, and I posted a link to that in the chat so you could see that as well. The bullet is very simple. It says face coverings include cloth or disposable masks. And so I would keep the guidance in mind from Lauren, covering nose, covering mouth, but it's very open in terms of what works best for your student.
I do know, Heather, that there was in a recent communication that if a student does need an exception around wearing a mask, they need to put that request into Student Accessibility Services so that that exemption can be on file, so that if there are concerns, whether within the community or the student themselves has concerns, that they have a portal for advocacy across the university community. And then also to be mindful that these are requirements that are being made for faculty and staff as well. And so faculty are to be wearing a face covering as well, and not necessarily just a plastic shield when they're teaching in person, and unless they're standing behind an acrylic barrier. So a mask needs to be worn when they're in the academic classroom teaching, unless they're behind an acrylic barrier and sort of have that formal structure between them and their student body. So again, this is university-wide. It's not just a student or faculty measure.
Definitely. And that email that I just linked covers all of those things in great detail if you would like to review that. So if we spend the night in Williamsburg, are we able to have brunch with our student in a dining hall on campus?
Unfortunately not. Our dining halls are not yet open to the public. However, you are welcome to invite your student to join you for perhaps a meal off campus instead.
Okay. We don't have very many questions left, and we still have Lauren for 30 minutes. So if you are with us and you have a question about orientation, move-in, or anything else, please do feel free to submit those as we are working through them. So for a transfer student who is studying remotely and living at home, given the substantial adjustment to a new school, new environment, is it possible to take fewer than 12 credits for this semester?
It is possible to receive, in this case, taking fewer than 12 credits is called taking an underload or underloading here on our campus. And so in order for a student to receive permission to underload, they will need to actually work with our enrollment services specialist or coordinator out of the Dean of Students office. And they won't want to make that decision until after they've chatted a little bit with their pre-major faculty advisor. Given that we're talking about a transfer student, they should already have their faculty advisor and have participated already in one appointment. And so I would encourage your student to go ahead and reach out to that faculty member and discuss that concern and discuss this option and see if an underload might be appropriate for them.
Wonderful. How many activities during orientation will be in person?
So in-person activities, there will be at least one a day that will be in-person based, and all of those in-person activities will be developed based off of immediate residence hall floor community. So I talked a little bit about sort of that community bubble that a student will create. And so all orientation activities in person will be within the bubble. Now, if a student is not comfortable about joining their peers in that bubble in a physically distanced, face mask wearing space here on campus, they simply need to let their orientation aides know, and then they will just simply Zoom in to those conversations. I would imagine we're going to see that quite a bit. Again, those blended conversations happening amongst communities based off of students advocating for themselves. In addition to that, though, you will have dining halls that will be open that will obviously be engaging with students from across campus. And like restaurants under this phase, our dining halls are operating in a similar manner around sanitation, requirements for face coverings, and designated pathways and served meals, and all of those sort of good parameters that we know need to be in place. Dining halls have been sort of the way that we're going to work dining here on campus has been an interesting conversation to have, especially around orientation. A lot of the beauty of orientation is that it gives students a chance to explore and to try new foods and to sort of start laying out for themselves their nutritional plan. And so we've been having a lot of talks with Sodexo, our dining services provider, about how dining halls may or may not look over the course of this upcoming next few weeks. And we're glad to report that it will look very similar, but obviously with those precautions in mind. So the same high level of detail paid towards allergens and nutritional needs, as well as to offering comfort foods, as well as entrees that expand one's palate, if you will. So it's going to be quite an adventure over the course of the next few weeks for students who maybe aren't used to the dining hall setting or the cafeteria setting. And I think that they are definitely rising to the challenge by offering grab and go options as well as takeout menus that I think new and returning students will be excited about.
Okay, I have a question here. Can you tell us a little bit about convocation and how that is all going to work on the first day of classes?
So convocation for us this year is going to be a two-part process. And so on the first day of classes this fall, we will actually celebrate via virtual watching groups. So we will have a formal academic kickoff for the fall semester virtually. We'll be encouraging our students to watch that program, watch that event in watch party settings. Would encourage families then to sort of form their own watch parties back at home. And then we'll be celebrating across campus through special dining menus and special dining treats that will be given out to all new students across the university community. So a little bit different in the fall, but ultimately when it's safe for us to assemble, we will be doing so with the grand tradition of the ceremony, and the procession through the Wren, as well as into the cheering crowds at the Sunken Garden. It's a tradition not to be missed, and it's definitely one that we want all of our new students to participate in.
Okay, can you go over the roles of RA, OA, OAD, etc.? So many acronyms.
All right, William and Mary loves our acronyms. There's actually an acronym abbreviation page found on the FYE website, Heather. It's under our resources page where we outline a lot of those different acronyms. So a lot of student leaders are invested in the success of your students. A lot of students on our campus as upper level students want to give back and want to ensure that new students have an experience that is worthy of the William and Mary name and community standard. And so you'll see a number of different student leader organizations step forward during this transition time. Resident assistants, or RAs, are hired by the Office of Residence Life, and they are paid student staff members who live in hall with your new students. Part of their role is not only community development, but also health and safety. And so they have requirements that are not only about helping students build and form relationships with one another, but also ensuring that the residence hall communities are safe and are safe for all students, as well as nurturing of their individual interests and academic pursuits. So resident assistants are student leaders and student supports that are with students year-round during the time of their residency. An orientation aide, or an OA, is a volunteer student leader who returns to campus 2 weeks prior to the start to be trained in all things resource and transition, who guides your student through orientation and then stays with them in a mentor or a coach capacity over the course of the academic year. We often hear about OAs and their students remaining friends beyond the orientation period, and that's really a testament to the relationship that forms during this time of transition. OAs are paired to each community, to each RA community, in a ratio of 2 or 3 per floor community. So there's a very high student leader to student ratio, which helps them, again, sort of increase that resource network that we know is so important over the course of their first few weeks on campus. This means that we have an OA staff of roughly 225 student leaders. And that doesn't include the student leaders who are going to be serving in the remote orientation aid capacity this year. And so we're glad to have expanded our student leaders to help all of our students be successful over the course of the fall semester. Our OAs are supervised by a team of 10 orientation area directors. All of these OADs have been hired in the year prior to help us plan, hire, and support our orientation aid team. And so those 10 OADs are the student leaders who are currently in training with me. And we are currently working through how all of this is going to go about, how do all of the rotations work during orientation, and how do we ensure that all students are cared for and supported during this time of high transition. These are also student leaders that will be supporting Heather, parent and family programs, and you all over the course of the move-in days, as they will be the student leaders staffing your welcome tents. And so look for students in neon shirts. Those are the orientation staff members, and they'll be happy to help however they can.
That's such a great explanation of our students. And I know that for our students who are just now incoming, the orientation aid experience is also something that students look forward to participating in, because they had such a great time during orientation and they formed such great bonds with their OAs during this orientation period. So it's a great community building piece for sure. Will students meet with their advisor in person or remotely to discuss scheduling?
The pre-major advisor appointment will be based on the faculty and students' comfort level. And so if faculty members and students are comfortable meeting and they're able to do so safely, they are allowed to meet in person. However, I do believe that most will probably happen virtually, simply based off of timing or location, especially keeping in mind the physical distancing. That 6-foot radius is really important to us, and we really want to make sure that we maintain it. And our faculty are very much aware that sometimes their offices don't allow for that distancing, based off of some of our older academic spaces. And so I believe the first one's probably going to happen virtually for most students, but don't worry, all new students are required to have follow-up academic advising meetings, one in the fall semester before spring course registration, and then once again in the spring before they register for fall and moving forward. And so there will be opportunities to have those face-to-face conversations.
My daughter is waiting until the first day of class to buy textbooks. Is that a terrible idea? To what degree is the bookstore open as students move in?
Yes, waiting to buy textbooks after your final course selection has been made is not a terrible idea. A lot of our students will actually go online. Well, I should back up and say a lot of our students will go on a bookstore tour during the welcome days. There are bookstore tours being offered between 9 to 5 p.m. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of those welcome days, every hour at the top and bottom of the hour. And so there are plenty of opportunities for students to go on the bookstore tour. And what they'll find is, as they're going through that tour, they're going to find that they're probably going to end up ordering their books online and then go and pick them up at the bookstore. So gone are the days where they might go into the basement and they find that section of books and sort of peruse and pull them off the shelf. And so the bookstore has come out with a calendar of academic book pickup windows based off of student last names. Those will start as early as Sunday of orientation, especially for our transfer students who may have already cemented their schedule for the fall, and they'll run throughout the course of the rest of the week. We will publish that and share it out through the individual orientation schedules, as well as in an upcoming hot topic, so that students can plan appropriately. If students aren't able to pick up their books during their designated sort of alphabetical window, they simply just need to let the bookstore know, and they'll make arrangements to meet them off to the side.
Okay. When is the last day to cancel our housing contract?
That is an excellent question, and I'm going to look to Heather because that date has been rolling around for quite a bit of time. I know that with the change, it has moved, and I believe it is on one of our Path Forward pages.
Okay, Residence Life will be flexible with housing contract cancellations through September 3rd, 2020. After this date, they will defer to cancellation procedures listed in the housing contract.
There we go. So September 3rd also coincides with when returning students are sort of slated to potentially return back to campus. And so I think some of that timing is sort of to minimize duplicative efforts, if you will.
Okay. If you only arrive with one helper, does that person stay with the things at or near the car? Do you recommend 2 helpers instead of 1 to make the process go more quickly? We have a 14-year-old and are trying to figure out if it's best for one family only to help move in, or if 14-year-old and 1 parent stay outside.
Oh, that's a conundrum. I think the process definitely moves more quickly if you're able to unload the car onto the curb, and then one person goes and moves the car and the other person sort of starts to move things into the building. Given timing and age and numbers, obviously that's never going to sort of be a perfect scenario for a lot of folks. But I do think that you have to work with what you have and recognize that we will be flexible if we are seeing that you are making every effort to sort of be moving forward in your move-in process. And so if if you have questions or concerns, or if you need additional hands or help, feel free to reach out to FYE at wm.edu. We have been able to provide one family with some additional community support where they needed an extra pair of hands. I don't know that we can provide one for everyone, but I think if you're looking for someone to be willing just to sort of stand next to your belongings while you move the car, I'm pretty sure we can find you someone to do that.
Thank you. For planning purposes, are the dinners we see listed on the orientation schedule a formal, organized event, or is it just a time slot to eat in the dining halls?
So the meals that you're seeing in the Welcome Day events are not formal slated activities. They are come and go as students are able, and in a lot of cases, students will sort of see who's available and then pick a time based off of what other activities are happening. And so students are welcome to come and go as they please. The only parameter is that we have made a note as to which buildings or which move-in routes should partake in meals at which dining location. We want to make sure that all students have an opportunity to visit both dining locations that are open during that time frame, so they see the opportunities or to see the availability of foods in both locations.
Okay. Just reading through the questions here.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems my student and his roommate overlap during move-in. How can we all be in the room safely?
Through conversation. So that is obviously not probably the ideal situation for a lot of families, especially when you want to have some time with your student to move them in safely and to sort of have your own alone time during that process. I think it's probably wise for your students to have some conversations about timing and to talk about expectations around sort of who's coming with you and what is your comfort level around sort of the current health situation, and also making sure that everybody is prepared to play nicely during that time frame. This might also be a good time for potentially parents to reach out to one another and to have a conversation as well. The worst thing that I think could happen is for people to show up and not realize that the other party is also slated for a similar time frame. So the more conversation you can have about how that will work, the better. Again, I think maintaining physical distance as much as you possibly can, limiting numbers of people in the room at any one point in time. So maybe once things get moved into the room, you limit who's actually in the room doing the setting up. That's probably a good plan to think about from the onset. And let's be honest, as soon as you get the two students in there with all of their totes and tubs and all sorts of other sundry items, they'll be busy sort of unpacking themselves and getting to know one another. And so parents having an opportunity to talk with one another and making plans for sort of building their communication and relationship may not be a bad idea.
Are all of the dining hall options takeout only?
No, the dining halls are open for dine-in as well. Takeout or grab and go is an option. If students would prefer to eat outside of the dining hall, they're more than welcome to do that. They simply need to let folks know as they are checking in to the building. Keep in mind during the welcome days and orientation, they simply need to show their green wristband in order to participate in meals. Once the first day of classes rolls around, they'll move to a contactless system where they'll use their tribe card and simply tap the sensor and then move forward with the process. Grab and go will be available at all locations for all meals. And then special takeout menus will also be available based off of timing. And those schedules will be published in the mobile app that's offered through Dining Services.
Okay. Are there places in the basements of the residence halls or other places for us for overnight bicycle storage?
I don't believe there are actual storage spaces in the residence halls for bicycles. There are extenuating circumstances such as over breaks and such where students are allowed to keep their bikes in hall. But unfortunately, for the most part, the bike racks outside will be where bikes need to sort of maintain their presence.
Okay. If we arrive early for an afternoon check-in and would like to walk around campus, where can we park the car?
You're welcome to park your car in the location that is designated for your move-in route to start off with. It depends, I think, on what part of campus you're planning to explore. In some ways, because you'll want to make sure that you're perhaps staying out of the fray of move-in traffic if you're early. So you might just want to be mindful of sort of the ebb and flow of traffic in Williamsburg that day. The stadium parking lot, the parking lot that's directly adjacent to Zabel Stadium, Kaplan Arena lot, as well as the parking garage will all be open and available, and you're more than welcome to utilize those.
My son's roommate spot is vacant, so no roommate assigned. Should he move into the room as if he is going to be living alone?
So tempting to do. Would not recommend it. I think if your student spot has not yet been assigned, that I would recommend that they go in with an assumption that they may find someone that they want to room with, or perhaps or they may have somebody who will move in or be assigned to them within the coming weeks through a room change. If no one has been placed in the space, then they're welcome to sort of start spreading their belongings. But until there's an opportunity to buy out that spot with Residence Life, they should always sort of live with the notion in the back of their brain that someone may move into the room with them.
Okay, can I bring a dolly to help with move-in in Lemon?
Yes, you are more than welcome to bring a dolly to help you move into Lemon. It may not necessarily help you too awful much, depending on the floor you're headed. Lemon is one of the few that does have an elevator, but you'll just want to be mindful of the various steps and curbs that we have out and about around campus. But Lemon, for certain, is a little bit more accessible than some of our other residence halls.
What do you suggest to bring for cooling down a dorm room without air conditioning?
Fans. I am a big fan of the box fan, especially if you can fit it in the window. They work well for bringing cool air in and also working as exhaust and pulling hot air out, depending on the time of year. I also think it's about being strategic with the fan. And so a fan in the window sometimes, or even a fan sort of near a door just to keep circulation going, is often the best route to go in order to help the cooling down process. It's a lot about circulation and airflow versus the actual cooling effect.
When will first-time in college students be able to select their remaining courses?
So all incoming students will be able to finalize their schedule the Monday of orientation. And so at that point in time, between 5:30 and 6:30 p.m. Eastern, they'll be able to log back into Banner and complete course registration. They will need to have the PIN that's been assigned to them in order to access the system, and they will receive that PIN at their pre-major faculty advisor meeting earlier in the orientation program.
Do we have an idea of how students will be able to use library services if they are a remote student?
So the library has an excellent online database and also allows for book exchanges and pickups with other libraries across the university network. And so remote students should be able to log into the SWEM library database and portal just as any other student would. They're able to request interlibrary loans, and depending on proximity, may be able to actually pick up a book from another library or another university library in there that's a little bit more convenient than perhaps driving to Williamsburg. But all services and programs that are offered to in-person students will also be available in some way, shape, or form to remote students as well. And that's important for you and your students to hear and to really think through, because opportunities for health and wellness, for counseling, academic enrichment, everything will be offered in person, as well as typically in a virtual or hybrid format as well.
Okay. Are hall kitchens, lounges, etc., open and available for students to use?
This is the it depends answer, because lounges have definitely been de-densified. And depending on physical distancing, some of them simply won't even allow more than 2 people to be in the space. And so I know Residence Life has been working to determine which lounges may be open and available versus others. Residence Life has also been working with other common area building spaces, if you will, such as our student centers, Campus Center, the Sadler Center, to think about how can students utilize those common spaces for gathering appropriately, either for study groups or the like, and especially Swim Library has been part of those conversations. Kitchens will be available for use. However, public refrigerators will be offline, and so we would encourage you and your student to consult with roommates and determine who might be bringing a personal refrigerator for their space. Students have been made aware of an external vendor that Residence Life recommends, who can help have in place microwaves, fridges, and things of that nature before move-in, which helps with the moving in and out process as well. But public kitchens will be available as far as I am aware. It is just the public refrigerators that will be off limits.
Okay. Where do you suggest students take online classes besides in their own residence hall?
Yes. Sorry, it took me a second to sort of process that question. I was like, of course you're going to take online classes at William & Mary. In terms of actually engaging in coursework, I think this is one of those opportunities where students will have a chance to explore campus through a different lens than perhaps before. Academic classrooms that are not currently in use will of course be available for students to use following proper disinfecting protocols and wipe down expectations. Students will be able to utilize common spaces in buildings such as the Sadler and Campus Centers, and the library of course will be in their common spaces, will be available as well. In some cases, this might be where we see students who are engaged in remote learning, but doing so in a together manner. We already have had a number of students who have told us in breakout sessions this summer that they have already started to form study groups or meeting groups where they know 3 or 4 other people are going to be in the same remote class, and they're going to be joining together, in the library at the same time, so that they can sort of have a cohesive experience together, but still be following appropriate protocols. And I think that's really great, because I think that shows that our students really are looking for the community feel that William & Mary is known for. And that it's going to help them also think a little bit outside of the box and problem solve about what are good study spaces for me, because what's a good study space for me or a good learning environment for me may not necessarily be the same learning environment that Heather needs when going through that coursework.
Okay, so I know that we still have questions open in the queue, but we are out of time. Lauren, I'm sure her OADs are anxious to have her back at training. So if you do have questions that were not answered, please email us at families@wm.edu, and we will do our best to get an answer for you. You most likely won't get an answer until Monday when we're back in the office. But do know that those time-sensitive questions that you're asking regarding testing and these move-in dates that are coming up, we are working to get answers to those questions as we speak. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, and thank you, Lauren, for spending a couple hours with us as we get ready for move-in. And we'll see a lot of you next week. Goodbye, everyone.